Devin suddenly switched his regular cigarettes to a cotton candy-flavored vape. I asked him why the sudden change. Hadn't he always insisted that vapes lacked the kick he needed to handle his work stress? He took a slow drag, his voice dripping with irritation. No reason. I was at the mall, tried it, and liked it, so I switched. Then he walked into his study and locked the door behind him, a habit that had become second nature to him lately. I acted as if I hadn't noticed his shift. As always, I picked up his discarded suit jacket and headed downstairs to the dry cleaners. After all, he was in a rush to text the girl who had bought him that childish vape. And me? I was in a rush to accidentally run into Albert, the man who had just bought the most expensive penthouse in our luxury complex at exactly 6:25 p.m. Devin is 10 years older than me. Because he was always the protective, mature type in our relationship, he had spent our entire dating history coddling me. In the early years of our marriage, he washed my delicates, apologized first after every argument, and showered me with surprise gifts on every holiday. But about 6 months ago, the coddling stopped. So I adapted. I started chasing him, playing the role of the devoted, doting wife. When he came home from work, I would immediately fetch his slippers. The moment he took off his suit, I would rush it down to the dry cleaners. When he was working in his study, even if he snapped at me and called me annoying for interrupting him, I never fought back. I would just smile and say, "Don't work too hard, honey." Devin didn't notice my transformation. Instead, my submission only made him complacent. He forgot my birthday, then our anniversary. 2 weeks ago, when the World Cup started, he completely forgot our sacred tradition of drinking beer and staying up together to watch every single match.
He didn't invite me.
When I finally tracked him down to our favorite local bar, I found him sitting in our usual spot, clinking glasses with a strange young girl to celebrate a goal, using the exact ritual he and I had shared for a decade. Even then, I didn't lose heart. A middle-aged man with a bit of money straying in his marriage? It was practically a cliché. But today, when the cloying scent of cotton candy vape filled our living room, it didn't just make me feel incredibly cheap, it made me feel painfully outdated. Suddenly, the effort of coddling Devin felt exhausting. I decided it was time to find someone else to dote on. I had begged Devin countless times to quit smoking or at least switch to vapes because I couldn't stand the smell of smoke. He had never done it for me. Yet for her, he did it instantly. To run a successful business in a high-end neighborhood like ours, you have to be incredibly sharp. Frank, the owner of the dry cleaners, was no exception. When I walked into his shop at exactly 6:25 p.m., he took Devin's suit and gave me a knowing look. "Mrs. Callahan, do you have plans tonight?" I set up a small screening room in the back with some beers and barbecue. "I was thinking of watching the World Cup match here. Care to join?" I smiled. "Sure, I don't have much going on. By the way, is my quarterly membership expiring? Let me renew it." Frank didn't hesitate to print out the invoice. The price had gone up by $500, but I paid it without blinking. Just as he handed me my receipt, Albert walked in. As usual, he wore slides, a simple polo, and shorts. There were no visible logos, but the tailoring of his clothes screamed bespoke luxury. Frank was incredibly smooth. He took Albert's garment and repeated the invitation. Albert, who seemed to have a friendly rapport with Frank, gave a quiet nod and agreed. That was how I ended up sitting in the back of a dry cleaner's screening room, drinking beer with Albert, a 39-year-old, divorced billionaire with no kids. Because we didn't know each other well, and Albert was a naturally reserved man, the evening was quiet. Aside from the commentary on the television, the only sound was the cracking of beer cans. The barbecue on the table went entirely untouched. About 15 minutes into the game, Frank tried to break the ice. "Mrs. Callahan, I recall you mentioning your husband is a huge soccer fan. Why don't you call him down? The more the merrier." At the mention of Devin, I didn't have to fake my sadness. My face naturally fell. "He's busy," I said quietly. Then I picked up a beer and downed the entire can. The next morning, I woke up with a bird's nest of hair and a blinding headache, remembering absolutely nothing of the night before. Until Frank sent me a video. In it, a completely wasted version of myself was dragging Albert and Frank around, desperately trying to start a dance party in the middle of the tiny screening room. Staring at the screen, I wanted to sink into the earth. I had wanted to catch Albert's attention, but certainly not by making an absolute fool of myself. To my surprise, there was a new contact in my phone, along with a message. "Are you awake, Mrs. Callahan?" I tapped on the profile. It was Albert. "Who is this?" I played dumb. "Albert." "Oh, I am so sorry, Albert. I drank far too much last night." "Don't worry about it. Do you have a headache today?" "No, I'm okay. Thank you and Frank for making sure I got home safely." After I sent that, Albert didn't reply. I wasn't bothered. A man in his position had an empire to run. He wasn't going to spend his day texting a married woman about her hangover. I knew when to back off. 2 weeks passed. I continued to run into Albert at the cleaners almost every evening. We maintained our routine, exchanging nothing more than polite nods and smiles. Frank, growing impatient on my behalf, whispered to me one afternoon, "You're still just waiting around? Why haven't you made a move?" I laughed softly.
How?
Am I supposed to ask a billionaire to be my side piece? I'm not that delusional. But the truth was, a part of me was still holding on to Devin, even though Devin was pulling away further and further. He hadn't come home last night, nor the night before. When I called him 2 nights ago, he actually answered, but his voice was sharp with annoyance. "I told you I'm in a meeting. Why do you keep calling me?" Before I could even choke out an apology, the line went dead. Last night, he didn't even bother to pick up. Instead, he posted a photo of an airplane wing on his social media. I couldn't help myself. I left a comment. "Honey, you didn't tell me you were traveling?" Devin replied publicly, right beneath my comment. "Don't you have anything better to do? If you're that bored, go sign up for a yoga class." I cried all night because of that comment. Even now, my eyes were swollen and red. Remembering that suffocating despair, I turned to Frank. "Frank, let me renew my membership for another 6 months. Organize another World Cup night for us, will you?" Frank pulled out the payment terminal immediately. I tapped my card for another $5,000. That evening started out just like the others, the three of us sitting in quiet companionship, watching the match. But then, my phone buzzed with a new contact request. The accompanying message read, "Hey girl, I'm your husband's girlfriend. Mind adding me back?" It ended with a playful emoji sticking its tongue out. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped my beer. After an agonizing struggle, I tapped accept. The moment the connection went through, she sent a video. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was Devin, kissing her with a raw, tender passion he hadn't shown me in years. It quickly became too intimate, and I had to close the screen. My chest felt as if it were being crushed under a heavy weight. Before this, I had always told myself that if Devin wanted to leave, I would let him. I could find another man. But in that moment, the sheer, suffocating reality of his betrayal was enough to make me feel like I was dying. I had been with Devin since I was 20. I was young and innocent when we met. He was my first kiss, my first lover, my entire world. But when he was 30, he liked 20-year-olds. Now that he was 40, he still liked 20-year-olds. By halftime, I couldn't even pretend to be okay. Without saying a word to Frank or Albert, I set my beer down, bit my lip to keep from sobbing, and walked out of the room. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed inside. I didn't go down to run into Albert, and I didn't call Devin. But the girl didn't stop. Her messages kept coming, each one more venomous than the last. "You old bird, do you really think you deserve a man like Devin? I heard you're barely an A cup. Devin told me he only likes C cups. I looked up your social media. You must be over 120 pounds by now. No wonder Devin never takes you to corporate events anymore. You're an embarrassment." Along with the insults, she sent intimate photos of them. They were repulsive. Every time one popped up, I would run to the bathroom and dry heave. Another month slipped away. Then came another text from her. "We're back in the country, by the way. I bet Devin didn't tell you." Haha, wanna know why? Because we played a game while we were abroad, and I told him he wasn't allowed to call or text you for the whole month. Can you believe a 40-year-old man can be this obedient? He does whatever I say. Staring at the glowing screen, after living like a ghost in my own home for a month, I finally pulled open the curtains. I walked into the bathroom and carefully applied makeup to cover my hollow, pale face. Once I was finished, I called Devin's secretary. She clearly had no idea about the affair and easily gave me the name of the restaurant where Devin was hosting a dinner tonight. I slipped into a silk dress, grabbed my bag, and drove to the venue. Through the glass of the private dining room, I saw Devin sitting at the head of the table. He looked remarkably rejuvenated, even wearing a youthful, trendy tie. And me? I had spent the past month sobbing into a silent phone, begging a voicemail to answer. "Devin, please, just pick up." The memory brought a sharp pain to my chest. Inside the room, the girl was practically draped over his lap, pouring his wine and feeding him. I wiped away a stray tear, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. Sorry to interrupt everyone. The room went dead silent. Devin looked up, his face hardening with shock. But his first instinct wasn't to push the girl away. He simply frowned, lecturing me like an disappointed boss. "What are you doing here? Wait for me outside." Then, as if to salvage his pride in front of his business partners, he chuckled dryly. Apologies, gentlemen. My wife. She's been a homemaker for too long and has forgotten her manners. I asked her to pick me up, and she just barged in. He turned to the girl. Lexi, honey, would you mind showing my wife out? Lexi smirked, stood up, and sauntered over to me. She leaned close, whispering in my ear, "Don't make a scene and embarrass Devin. Get out." Embarrass. The word hit me like a physical blow. Was I embarrassing? Yes. If this had been years ago, I would have flipped the table. But instead, I had spent the last month cowering in my house, afraid to shatter the illusion of my marriage, letting a cheap mistress look down on me. It was pathetic. I didn't offer Lexi a single word in response. I simply raised my hand and slapped her across the face. Then, I pulled a set of divorce papers from my bag and threw them onto the table. Devin, I wanted to handle this quietly. Even though you cheated, I wanted us to end things with some dignity. But your little mistress here is too vile. She sends me your bedroom photos daily and brags about keeping you away from home. I had to get your secretary to tell me where you were just to deliver these. The papers are signed on my end. Enjoy your dinner. Without looking at him again, I turned and walked out. I didn't call a cab. I walked all the way back to our neighborhood. My heels cut into my skin until my ankles bled, and halfway through the walk, a torrential downpour began. But I barely felt it. A person's breaking point always happens in a single, quiet instant. My collapse had begun 6 months ago, the first time he stopped washing my clothes, the first time he started wearing those youthful ties. It took me 4 hours to reach the estate gates. During that entire time, Devin didn't call or text once. It was clear who he had chosen. My chest was tight with a pain so sharp I could barely breathe. As I entered the courtyard, I saw Albert, walking his dog in the damp air just as the rain stopped. I carried my ruined heels, my makeup running down my face, and walked up to him with a trembling voice. "Albert, do you have time for a beer tonight?" The rain had stopped, but the night air remained thick, damp, and freezing. My wet silk dress clung to my skin like a cold, heavy shroud. Water dripped from the ends of my hair, tracing icy paths down my neck and spine. My bare feet, caked in dirt and stained with dark streaks of dried blood where the straps of my heels had sliced into my skin, felt numb against the wet pavement. Albert stood under the amber glow of the courtyard lamppost, holding the leash of his German shepherd. He wore a heavy, dark wool overcoat over a gray cashmere sweater. He looked solid, dry, and entirely composed, a stark contrast to the human wreckage standing a few feet away from him. He didn't startle. He didn't ask a barrage of questions, nor did his eyes widen in polite horror. He simply looked at me, taking in the ruined makeup, the bare feet, and the trembling of my shoulders. "The dog needs to go inside anyway," he said. His voice was a quiet, low rumble that seemed to steady the air around us. "Come." He didn't offer me his arm. He seemed to understand that even the gentlest touch might shatter whatever fragile strength was keeping me upright. Instead, he shortened the leash on his dog, turned, and walked toward his building at a deliberate, slow pace, matching his steps to my painful, limping stride. The lobby of his building was silent, clad in polished black marble and bathed in soft, recessed lighting. The security guard at the desk started to look up, but a brief, sharp glance from Albert made the man look down immediately, pretending to be deeply engrossed in his ledger. We rode the elevator to the penthouse in complete silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the machinery and the wet, rhythmic drip of water from my hem onto the stainless steel floor. I stared at the indicator lights, my mind completely blank. The adrenaline that had carried me through the slap, the confrontation, and the 4-hour walk had vanished, leaving behind a hollow, aching fatigue that settled deep into my bones. When the elevator doors slid open directly into his private foyer, Albert stepped out first. He unclipped his dog's leash, and the large animal trotted quietly toward a corner of the living room, settling onto a leather mat without a sound. "Wait here for a moment," Albert said. He walked down a hallway and returned a minute later carrying a large plush white towel and a pair of oversized, soft gray fleece slippers. He handed me the towel first. "Dry your hair," he said. "The bathroom is the second door on the left. There is a clean robe on the back of the door. Leave your wet clothes in the hamper. I'll prepare some tea." "Albert," I croaked. My throat felt raw, as if I had been swallowing sand. "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently, his expression unreadable. "Go." Inside the bathroom, the floor was heated. The warmth radiating from the cream-colored tiles seeped into the soles of my frozen feet, sending a sharp tingling ache through my calves. I caught a glimpse of myself in the massive, backlit mirror and quickly looked away. The woman staring back at me looked haunted. Smudged black mascara ringed her eyes. Her skin was a translucent, sickly pale, and her hair clung to her skull in damp, tangled clumps. I peeled off the ruined silk dress, letting it fall to the floor with a wet, heavy thud. I showered quickly, not to get clean, but to wash away the smell of the rain, the restaurant, and the cloying, invisible scent of cotton candy that felt like it had been branded onto my skin. I let the hot water run until my skin was flushed bright red. When I stepped out, I wrapped myself in the heavy, dark gray waffle weave robe he had left for me. It was far too large, the sleeves swallowing my hands, but the weight of it felt like a shield. I walked back into the living room. The apartment was vast, minimalist, and immaculately clean, yet it didn't feel cold. A low fire crackled in a modern, double-sided fireplace. On the low coffee table sat a steaming, ceramic pot of tea, 2 cups, and a small first aid kit. Albert was sitting on the sofa, his overcoat gone, wearing just his gray sweater. He looked up as I entered and nodded toward the space beside him. Seat. I sat down on the far end of the sofa, tucking my feet beneath the oversized hob. He poured the tea. It was ginger and honey, the steam rising in sweet, spicy plumes. He handed me a cup and I held it with both hands, using the heat of the ceramic to thaw my frozen fingers. Your feet, he said, gesturing to the first aid kit. May I? I hesitated, then slowly pulled my right foot out from under the hem of the hob. The ankle was raw, the skin scraped away where the stiff patent leather of my designer heels had rubbed repeatedly against the bone. Albert knelt on the floor without a second thought. He didn't look like a billionaire in that moment. He looked like a man performing a quiet, necessary task. He opened the kit, pulled out an antiseptic wipe, and looked up at me. This will sting. I've felt worse tonight, I said quietly. He applied the wipe. I winced, my toes curling, but I didn't pull away. He cleaned the dirt and blood with practiced, steady hands, then applied a soothing antibiotic ointment and covered the wounds with large, flexible bandages. He did the same to the left foot. When he was finished, he packed the kit away, washed his hands in the small wet bar nearby, and returned to his seat on the sofa, picking up his own cup of tea. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. My husband is having an affair, I said. The words came out flat, devoid of the tears that had choked me for the past month. I found them tonight at a business dinner. I gave him the divorce papers, slapped his mistress, and walked home in the rain. Albert took a slow sip of his tea. Why did you walk? Because if I had called a cab, I would have had to explain to a stranger why I was crying. And if I had gone home, I would have had to sit in an empty house, waiting for a phone call that was never going to come. I looked down at my tea, the dark liquid swirling gently. I wanted to see if anyone would notice if I just disappeared into the dark. I noticed, Albert said. I looked up, meeting his dark, steady eyes. There was no pity in them. Pity would have made me cry, and I was so incredibly tired of crying. Instead, there was only a calm, solid presence. You're a very foolish woman, Mrs. Callahan, he said, though his tone was devoid of malice. Walking 4 hours in a storm over a man who isn't worth the price of a cheap umbrella. A dry, bitter laugh escaped my throat. You're right. It was incredibly stupid. But, Albert continued, setting his cup down, you delivered the papers. That wasn't stupid. That was necessary. He stood up, walking over to a large credenza near the window. You can sleep in the guest suite tonight. It has its own entrance and a secure lock. No one will disturb you. Tomorrow, we will figure out what comes next. Why are you helping me, Albert? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We barely know each other. I'm just a messy, dramatic housewife who ruined your dry cleaners movie night. Albert paused, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. The wet streets below reflecting the neon lights like shattered glass. Because, he said without turning around, I remember what it feels like to be the last person to know your own life has ended. And I remember wishing someone had given me a dry towel and a quiet room to think. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the quiet, distant sound of classical music. For a long moment, I didn't open my eyes. I lay under the heavy, crisp duvet of the guest bed, pretending I was back in my own room, that Devin was downstairs, making breakfast, and that the last 6 months had been nothing but a long, suffocating nightmare. But when I shifted, the The sharp sting in my ankles brought me back to reality. I opened my eyes to unfamiliar gray walls, minimalist oak furniture, and a large window overlooking the city. The sun was shining brightly, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. The storm had cleared, leaving the sky a brilliant, pale blue. On the armchair at the foot of the bed sat a neatly folded pile of clothes. A pair of black tailor trousers, a simple white silk blouse, and a soft beige cardigan. On top of the pile was a small, handwritten note. These belong to my sister. She keeps a few things here, for when she visits. From Chicago. They should fit. Your clothes from last night are in the laundry room, dry and clean, but probably ruined by the rain. Come out when you are ready.
A.
I got out of bed, my feet feeling much better under the clean bandages. The clothes fit remarkably well, though the trousers were a bit loose around the
waist.
I washed my face, braided my hair to keep the wild curls under control, and walked out into the living room. Albert was sitting at the dining table, a laptop open in front of him.
He was
dressed in a crisp blue shirt, his hair damp from a recent shower. The German shepherd lay at his feet, tail wagging lazily as I entered. Good morning, Albert said, closing his laptop. Good morning. Thank you for the clothes.
They suit you, he said simply.
He stood up and gestured to the kitchen island, where a platter of fresh fruit, pastries, and a pot of coffee sat. Help yourself. I have a meeting in an hour, but we have time to talk. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and took a small piece of melon.
My
appetite was entirely gone, but I knew I needed to put something in my stomach if I was going to survive the day. Did he call? Albert asked. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It had been dead when I arrived, but Albert had plugged it into a charger in the guest room. I turned it on. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. 12 missed calls from Devin, 36 text messages, and, surprisingly, 3 missed calls from Frank at the dry cleaners. I opened the texts from Devin first. They were a masterclass in the psychological devolution of a guilty man. 10:15 p.m. What the hell was that? Where did you go? You embarrassed me in front of the board members. 11 p.m. Answer your phone. Lexi is crying. Her face is
swollen.
You've lost your mind. 12:30 a.m. Are you at home? The car isn't in the
garage.
Where are you? 2:15 a.m. If you think this little stunt is going to get you a bigger settlement, you're wrong. I have lawyers, Sarah. Don't play games with me. 5 a.m. Sarah, please. Let's talk. This is getting out of hand.
Call me.
Home. 7:30 a.m. Where are you? I'm calling the police. I stared at the messages, feeling a strange, hollow detachment. A month ago, a single angry text from him would have sent me into a panic, desperately typing out apologies, begging him not to be angry. Now, looking at his frantic shifting from anger to threats to desperation, he just seemed small. He's panicking, I said, sliding the phone across the counter to Albert. Albert glanced at the screen, his expression neutral. Naturally, he thought he had a docile, quiet wife who would suffer in silence while he played the young bachelor. By delivering those papers publicly, you didn't just hurt his pride, you threatened his reputation. In his circle, reputation is currency. I need to go back to the house, I said, taking a sip of the hot coffee.
I
need to pack my things before he tries to lock me out. He can't legally lock you out of your marital home, Albert noted. But he can make it incredibly unpleasant for you to be there. Do you have a lawyer?
No.
I downloaded those divorce papers from a legal template site yesterday afternoon. I felt a blush of embarrassment creep up my neck. I didn't think it through. I just wanted him to know I was done. Albert reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek leather card case, and slid a heavy, cream-colored business card across the table. This is Marcus Vance. He handled my divorce 4 years ago. He is thorough. He doesn't do template forms. Call him. Tell him I referred you. He will have a team at your house by noon to oversee the packing of your personal belongings and secure your financial documents. I looked at the card. Marcus Vance was one of the most expensive family law attorneys in the state. I had seen his name in the news during several high-profile corporate divorces. Albert, I can't afford him, I said quietly. My personal savings are modest. Devin handled all our investments. You can afford him, Albert said, his voice firm, because under state law, your husband is responsible for your legal fees during a divorce of this scale, especially with clear evidence of infidelity. Marcus will ensure of that. Consider it an investment in your future. I will cover the retainer for now.
You.
can pay me back when the settlement is finalized. I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motives. Why are you doing this? Alone like this, it's not just a neighborly favor. Albert leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. His gaze was steady, cool, and entirely honest. I don't like messy things, Mrs. Callahan. And I don't like bullies. Your husband has spent 6 months treating you like a piece of old furniture he can ignore until he decides to throw it out.
I want to see what happens when that.
Furniture decides to fall on his head. A small, genuine smile broke through my exhaustion. Thank you, Albert. Go get dressed, he said, checking his watch. My driver will take you to your
House.
Marcus's team will meet you there at 11. Don't speak to Devin alone. Let the lawyers do their job. The drive back to our estate was surreal. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class slid silently through the wrought iron gates of our community, a place that had felt like a sanctuary for 10 years, but now felt like a gilded cage. When the driver pulled up to the villa, I saw Devin's black Porsche parked crookedly in the driveway. The front door of the house was slightly ajar. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and repeated Albert's words in my head. Don't speak to him alone. As I stepped out of the car, another vehicle, a sleek black SUV, pulled up right behind us. 3 people in sharp, dark suits got out. The leader, a tall woman, with her hair pulled into a severe, elegant bun, walked up to me and extended her hand. Mrs. Callahan? I'm Victoria Sterling, Senior Associate at Vance and Associates. Mr. Vance sent us. We have a temporary court order protecting your right of entry, and we have brought a professional inventory team. Shall we? Her calm, professional demeanor was incredibly grounding. I nodded. Thank you.
Victoria.
Yes, let's go. The moment we stepped into the foyer, the sound of raised voices echoed from the living room. I don't care what you have to do. Just get the video taken down. Devin was shouting into his phone. If that footage of the restaurant gets to the board, the merger is dead. He rounded the corner into the foyer, his phone still pressed to his ear.
He
looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, his expensive linen shirt was rumpled, and his eyes were bloodshot. The youthfulness he had tried so hard to project last night had vanished, replaced by the haggard, desperate look of a middle-aged man in crisis. When he saw me, he froze. He hung up the phone without another word. Sarah, he breathed, stepping toward me. Where the hell have you been? I've been calling you all night. Do you have any idea what you've done? Before I could answer, Victoria stepped smoothly between us, her leather folder held like a shield. Mr. Callahan, my name is Victoria Sterling of Vance and Associates. We represent your wife in the matter of your impending divorce. Any further communication with Mrs. Callahan must go through our office. We are here to retrieve her personal effects and secure her financial documents as per the filed motion. Devin's face turned a dangerous, dark red. He looked over Victoria's shoulder at me, his teeth clenched. Vance and Associates? Are you kidding me, Sarah? Where did you get the money for? Marcus Vance? Who is backing you? That is none of your concern, Mr. Callahan, Victoria said, her voice remaining perfectly level, cool, and professional. If you attempt to interfere with our team, we will immediately file for an emergency restraining order and document seizure warrant. I suggest you step aside. 2 young men in gray polo shirts entered behind us, carrying large, heavy-duty plastic bins. They began moving toward the stairs under Victoria's direction. Devin let out a harsh, dry laugh. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think because you found some hotshot lawyer you're going to ruin me? You've been a housewife for 10 years. You don't know the first thing about our finances. Everything is in my name, under my corporate accounts. You'll get pennies.
Sarah. Pennies.
I looked at him. This was the man who, 5 years ago, had carried me over the threshold of this very house when I had a high fever, whispering that he would always protect me. This was the man who used to leave little love notes in my coat pockets. Now, he was standing in our foyer, his face twisted in ugly rage, bragging about his plans to starve me out. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The man I had loved for 10 years had died a long time ago. The creature standing in front of me was just a stranger wearing his skin. I don't want your pennies, Devin, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I want my half. And then I want to never see your face again. Your half. A high, whiny voice piped up from the top of the stairs. We all looked up. Lexi was standing on the landing, wearing one of my silk robes, the dark emerald one Devin had bought me for our 8th anniversary. Her face was indeed slightly red and puffy, but she had managed to apply a fresh coat of lip gloss. "You slapped me," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at me. "I'm going to sue you for assault." "Devin, tell her. She came into a private dinner and attacked me." "Lexi, shut up and go back upstairs," Devin snapped, not even looking at her. Lexi's jaw dropped in shock.
What?
"Devin, she's robbing you. Look at these people, they're taking your things." I said, "Go upstairs," he roared. Lexi flinched, her eyes filling with real tears this time. She turned on her heel and stomped back down the hallway, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I looked at Devin, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt a deep, profound sense of relief. He had traded a decade of loyalty, shared history, and quiet support for a girl who couldn't even handle a single stressful morning without throwing a tantrum. He had bought into the illusion of his own youth, and now he was realizing the price of admission. "Victoria," I said, turning my back on him. "My jewelry is in the safe in the master closet. My personal documents are in the desk in the study. Let's start there." "Right away, Mrs. Callahan," Victoria replied. As I walked up the stairs, Devin called out to me, his voice losing its aggressive edge, replaced by a sudden, pathetic plea. "Sarah, we can talk
About this.
We don't need to involve these people. Let's just sit down, please." I didn't stop. I didn't even turn around. The next month was a blur of legal paperwork, long meetings at Vance and Associates' glass-walled offices, and a quiet, steady restructuring of my life. I didn't stay at Albert's penthouse. As tempting as it was to remain in that safe, warm cocoon, I knew I needed to stand on my own feet. I leased a small, sunlit loft apartment 3 blocks away from the luxury complex.
It was a
Fraction of the size of the villa, but every piece of furniture, every coffee cup, and every book on the shelves was chosen by me for me. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't waiting for Devin to come home. I wasn't waiting for him to finish a meeting. I wasn't waiting for his mood to improve. I began waking up early, running along the riverfront, and rediscovering the hobbies I had abandoned to become a perfect wife. I started painting again, setting up an easel by the large loft windows. Every couple of days, I would walk down to Frank's dry cleaners to drop off my laundry. Frank had become my self-appointed guardian angel in the neighborhood. Whenever I walked in, he would slide a fresh cup of coffee across the counter and give me a detailed update on the local gossip. "Your ex-husband is looking terrible, Mrs. Callahan," Frank whispered to me one afternoon, leaning over the counter. "He came in last week with a mountain of dry cleaning. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month. And that girl, she was screaming at him in his car right outside my shop because he wouldn't buy her some designer bag. The whole street heard it." I smiled, taking a sip of the coffee. "Is that so, Frank?" "Oh, absolutely. And get this, the board at his firm is furious about that video. It went viral on the local business forums, you know. Prominent CEO's wife delivers divorce papers mid-dinner. Not a good look for a company trying to finalize a conservative merger." "I didn't upload the video, Frank," I said honestly. I know," Frank chuckled. "But whoever did, they deserve a medal." I had a strong suspicion who had ensured that video found its way to the right people, but I didn't say it aloud. Just as I was leaving the shop, Albert walked in. He was dressed in his usual quiet luxury, a dark cashmere sweater and tailored dark jeans. He stopped when he saw me, his dark eyes taking in my appearance.
I
Was wearing a simple cotton dress, my hair was loose and wavy, and for the first time, my eyes weren't red or swollen. "You look well, Sarah," he said. It was the first time he had used my first name, instead of Mrs. Callahan. "I feel well, Albert," I said, holding his gaze. "Thank you for everything." "Are you busy tonight?" he asked. I was thinking of opening a bottle of Barolo. "The German Shepherd misses your company." "Only the dog," I teased gently. A rare, genuine smile tugged at the corners of Albert's mouth. "The dog is the only one authorized to speak on the record. But the owner wouldn't mind the company either." "I'd like that," I said. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. While my life was slowly opening up like a flower after a long winter, Devin's was rotting from the inside out. The cotton candy vape, once a symbol of his youthful rebellion, had become a permanent fixture in his hand. But it no longer brought him the illusion of youth. Instead, it seemed to highlight how aged he really was. Lexi's initial excitement about being the triumphant young mistress had quickly faded when she realized that a high-profile divorce meant Devin's assets were temporarily frozen. Marcus Vance had been merciless. He had successfully argued to freeze Devin's discretionary corporate accounts pending a full forensic audit.
The
Multi-million-dollar villa was put under a temporary sale injunction. Devin could no longer afford to fund Lexi's lavish lifestyle without dipping into his personal cash reserves, which were rapidly dwindling under the weight of his own mounting legal bills. The cracks in their relationship became a public spectacle. One evening, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered only to hear the sound of heavy breathing and the faint, artificial scent of sweet blueberry smoke through the receiver. "Sarah?" It was Devin. His voice sounded thick, slurred, and desperate. "Devin? Why are you calling me? You know you're supposed to go through Victoria." "Sarah, please don't hang up," he begged. I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background.
He was at a bar.
"I made a mistake. A massive, stupid mistake." "I know you did, Devin. She's not you, Sarah," he stammered, his voice cracking. "She doesn't
Care about me.
She doesn't care if I'm tired. She doesn't care if my back hurts. All she wants is the card. She spent $10,000 on a watch yesterday, and when I told her the account was frozen, she called me an old, useless loser and threw a plate at my head." I sat on my sofa, looking out at the city lights. A year ago, this call would have broken my heart. I would have run to him, comforted him, and blamed myself for not being enough. Now, I felt nothing but a profound, almost clinical sense of pity. "You chose her, Devin," I said quietly. "You chose the 20-year-old who liked your money. You wanted to feel young. Well, this is what youth feels like.
It's
Loud, it's chaotic, and it doesn't care about your feelings. Sarah, please, let's just call off the divorce. We can go to counseling.
I'll
Get rid of her. I'll throw her out tonight. I'll go back to the regular cigarettes, I swear. I hate this damn vape. It tastes like chemicals. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't dying." The honesty in his voice was pathetic. He was 40, terrified of aging, terrified of losing his grip on his peak years, and he had thrown away a lifetime of genuine love to chase a shadow. "It's too late, Devin," I said. "The woman who would have saved you from yourself died the night I walked home in the rain. I'm not her anymore." "Who are you then?" he whispered, sounding small and defeated. "I'm someone who doesn't have to carry your jacket anymore," I said. And then I hung up. The final mediation took place on a rainy Tuesday morning in a neutral conference room downtown. The room was cold, dominated by a large mahogany table. On one side sat Marcus Vance, Victoria Sterling, and myself. On the other side sat Devin and his high-priced corporate defense attorney, a man named Henderson who looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. Lexi was not allowed in the room, but I had seen her sitting in the waiting area downstairs, wearing a bright pink designer outfit that looked entirely inappropriate for a legal office. She had been frantically texting on her phone, looking bored and angry. Devin sat opposite me. He looked 10 years older than his 40 years. His skin was sallow, his eyes dark-ringed, and his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through his papers. He kept looking at me, trying to catch my eye, but I kept my gaze focused entirely on Marcus. "Let's get straight to the point, Henderson," Marcus said, throwing a heavy blue folder onto the table. "Our forensic audit of Mr. Callahan's offshore holdings and shell companies has been completed. We have documented exactly $4.2 million in hidden assets that were not disclosed in his initial financial filing." Henderson's eyes flickered, but he didn't look surprised. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "Vance, my client is prepared to offer a lump sum settlement of $3 million, the retention of the primary villa by your client, and a monthly spousal support of $15,000 for 5 years. "That's a joke," Marcus said flatly. "Your client attempted to commit fraud by hiding assets. If we go to trial, the judge will not only award my client 60% of the marital estate, but your client will also face federal tax evasion charges for those offshore accounts. We want 70% of the total liquidated estate, including the sale of the villa, full ownership of the luxury complex apartment, and a permanent block on any spousal support reduction." 70%. Devin burst out, leaning over the table. "Sarah, you're ruining me. That's my life's work. You didn't earn a single dime of that money." I looked at him. I didn't flinch. I didn't let my voice shake. "I spent 10 years making sure you had a home to come back to, Devin," I said. my voice steady and cold. I spent 10 years managing your schedule, entertaining your clients, keeping your secrets, and curing your hangovers so you could go out and make that money. I gave you my youth. I gave you my 23-year-old self, my 25-year-old self, my 30-year-old self. You took those years and gave them to a girl who doesn't even know your middle name. The room went dead silent. You didn't just cheat on me, Devin, I continued. You tried to make me feel like I was the one who was failing. You tried to make me believe I was too old, too fat, too boring, just so you wouldn't have to face your own reflection in the mirror. I leaned forward, looking directly into his bloodshot eyes. We sign for 70% today, or we go to court tomorrow, and I let the board of your company read every single text message your mistress sent me, complete with the photos you took on your corporate business trips. I'm sure your conservative shareholders will love to see where their investment capital went. Devin stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked as if he was seeing me for the very first time. He realized with a sudden, crushing finality that the docile, submissive wife he had ignored for 6 months was gone. In her place was a woman who had nothing left to lose and a very, very sharp knife. He turned slowly to his lawyer. Henderson? Henderson looked at the documents, then at Devin.
He shook his head slowly.
Sign it, Devin. If this goes to a public trial, you lose the company. This is the best deal you're going to get. Devin's shoulders slumped. He looked defeated, hollowed out, and entirely broken. He reached for the gold pen on the table. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it, but he managed to scribble his signature on the bottom of the
page.
When he was finished, he threw the pen down. It rolled across the table, stopping just short of my folder. Are you happy now, Sarah? He whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and grief. You got everything. You took my money, my house, my reputation. You took it all. I stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored trousers. I looked at him, and, for the first time in 10 years, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no love, no sorrow. Just a clean, empty space where his memory used to live. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine, Devin, I said. And as for the rest, you gave it away. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. The villa was sold to a young tech entrepreneur, and my share of the proceeds was safely deposited into a private wealth account managed by an advisor Albert had recommended. I was a very wealthy woman, but more importantly, I was a free one. Devin's company had survived the merger, but his position had been severely compromised. He was demoted from CEO to a non-voting board member, a symbolic title with no real power. According to Frank's latest gossip, Lexi had left him the moment his offshore accounts were liquidated to pay my settlement. She had reportedly moved on to a younger, less complicated target in Miami, leaving Devin alone in a rented 2-bedroom apartment, surrounded by his empty cotton candy vape cartridges. On a warm Friday evening, the sun was setting over the city, casting a brilliant orange and purple glow across the sky. I sat on the balcony of my loft apartment, a canvas resting on the easel in front of me. I was painting the skyline, the colors blending together in a soft, peaceful wash.
The doorbell rang.
I wiped my hands on an old rag, walked over, and opened the door. Albert was standing in the hallway. He wasn't wearing his usual formal wear. Instead, he wore a simple white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing his strong, tanned forearms. He held a bottle of cold white wine in one hand and a small, beautifully wrapped box in the other. Am I interrupting? He asked, looking past me to the easel. Never, I smiled, stepping aside to let him in. Come in. He walked over to the balcony, looking at the painting. You've captured the light perfectly. It looks quiet. It is quiet, I said, leaning against the balcony railing next to him. For the first time in my life, my head is completely quiet. Albert set the wine bottle down on the outdoor table and handed me the small box. This is for you, a celebration of your official freedom. I opened the box. Inside was a delicate, beautifully crafted silver keychain. Attached to it was a single, heavy brass key. What's this? I asked, looking up at him. It's the key to the empty commercial space next to Frank's dry cleaners. Albert said, his voice soft but steady. I bought the building last month. I know you've been looking for a place to start your own art gallery and studio. Consider this your first lease. The first 6 months are on me. I stared at the key, my eyes welling with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness or betrayal. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude for a man who Didn't try to coddle me, didn't try to lock me away, but instead gave me the space to fly. Albert. I whispered. This is too much. No, he said, stepping closer. He reached out, his hand warm and gentle as he brushed a stray lock of hair away from my cheek. His eyes were dark, deep, and filled with a quiet, honest affection that had no demands, no expectations. It's exactly what you deserve. I looked at him, the man who had found me bleeding and broken in the rain, and who had quietly stood by my side while I rebuilt my own strength. I didn't ask him if he had time for a beer. I didn't play the submissive, chasing wife. I simply reached up, took his face in my hands, and kissed him. The kiss was slow, deep, and tasted of the warm, clean summer air.
It wasn't the
Desperate, frantic kiss of youth, nor was it the performative affection of a failing marriage. It was the quiet, solid beginning of a new story. When we pulled apart, Albert smiled, his hand lingering on my waist. So, he said, his voice a low, teasing rumble. About that wine? Pour the wine, Albert. I laughed, turning back to my painting as the last of. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of gold. We have all the time in the world.